Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Down a Rabbit Hole podcast with me, your host, CCSUAREZ. Thank you so much for coming back. I hope you are doing quite well. Today, we're going to be covering a topic that we've seen covered in many an episode of Law & Order SVU. Enter dum dum sound effect here. Today, we're falling down the rabbit hole of child brides, and more specifically, underage marriages in the United States. Now, when you think of child marriage, you probably think of some impoverished country, some crazy religion or cult, and sure, yes, it happens there too. But this complex issue is prevalent around the world, and it's also a murky issue hiding in the shadows of our own backyard as well. In today's episode, sensitive topics are discussed. Viewer discretion is advised. To begin, let's talk about the prevalence of child brides and underage marriages in the United States. According to a study conducted by the organization Unchained Last, which we will be referencing quite a bit in this episode, between 2000 and 2015, more than 200,000 minors were married off in the United States. The majority of these marriages involved young girls marrying older men, with some age gaps as wide as 20 years or more, which just gives me goosebumps and is absolutely disgusting. Some of the children were as young as 12 years old. In most cases, these marriages occurred in states with more lenient child marriage laws, such as Texas, Florida, and Kentucky. Are we surprised? I'm sure we're not. Religion can also play a big role in the prevalence of child marriages. Certain religious groups, such as the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the FLDS, have been known to condone and even promote underage marriages. And that is not to be confused with the Latter-day Saints, or the Church of Latter-day Saints, which is the Mormons, but the Fundamentalist Church, the FLDS, is a subsect of that, which is way more culty, and they do promote polygamy and child brides and marrying very young. If you want to know more about that, go ahead and watch the documentary Keep Sweet and Obey, I believe it is called. It is absolutely horrifying, and you'll get to hear first-hand accounts from these types of situations. It is absolutely awful. I will have other links to other articles and then other documentaries and TV shows as well that will be helpful if you are trying to fall down this rabbit hole, just like I have over the past few months. In some cases, young girls are coerced into marrying much older men as a means of maintaining control within the community. When New Jersey was trying to pass its total ban on child marriage, the Orthodox Jewish community lobbied against the legislation. Rabbi Avi Schnall stated, "Saying any marriage under 18 is illegal seems a bit extreme. It's a cultural thing. Mostly in Sephardic communities, culturally, they tend to get married younger," which is interesting because is it both parties being married younger? Is it consensual? Is it being forced by the families? Either way, it needs to be consensual, and children cannot give informed consent to anything, as we know. Now, this isn't just a religious issue, a cult issue, although that's where it kind of makes the most sense. This is also an entertainment industry issue. There have been several high-profile cases involving celebrities and underage marriages. One such example is the marriage between R&B singer and disgusting predator R. Kelly to then 15-year-old Aaliyah in 1994. God rest her soul. That beautiful, beautiful angel. The marriage was later annulled, but the incident highlights how the entertainment industry can sometimes perpetuate and condone underage marriages. And not only that, but underage relationships as well. If you look into it, there are a lot that are extra questionable, and it's very concerning. According to Variety.com, R. Kelly silenced Aaliyah and her family through a non-disclosure agreement following his marriage and subsequent annulment to the then 15-year-old singer. New allegations were made In the final installment of Lifetime's Surviving R. Kelly, which aired on January 2nd and January 3rd, the docuseries centered around R. Kelly's 2022 federal trial, where the NDA was brought up in the courtroom as evidence. The late Aaliyah was Jane Doe number 1 in the trial. Surviving R. Kelly utilizes Aaliyah's story to spotlight her as a victim of R. Kelly, after years of the media and music industry scandalizing her marriage to the now convicted singer in the 90s. It's crazy how 10, 20, 30 years ago, the media can frame something completely differently than we see it now. Aaliyah's debut album in 1994 was titled Age Ain't Nothing But a Number and was recorded when she was 14 years old. R. Kelly, who was Aaliyah's mentor and was first introduced to her by her uncle, music executive and manager Barry Hankerson, was the lead songwriter and producer of the album. At the time the album was released, rumors circulated that there was a relationship between 15-year-old Aaliyah and 27-year-old R. Kelly. The pair secretly married in August of 1994, and Aaliyah was only 15 at the time, but the marriage certificate falsified her age as 18 years old. The marriage was annulled by Aaliyah's parents in February of 1995, so at least they did that. In Surviving R. Kelly, on-camera interviews with individuals from R. Kelly's camp who were in the room when the duo wed expressed their regret over the marriage. Individuals who were close with both R. Kelly and Aaliyah share new details about the legal agreement that was allegedly forged between R. Kelly and Aaliyah's family. Members of Aaliyah's family declined to comment to producers of Surviving R. Kelly per a statement that aired as part of the Lifetime documentary series. And I'm sure her family has so much regret about all of this. There are a lot of conspiracy theories regarding her passing, her death, the plane accident, and all that. And I'm sure they are not happy with a lot of decisions that they made. So I don't blame them for refusing to comment. Another super creep of an example is rock and roll pioneer Jerry Lee Lewis, who passed away last year at the age of 87. When Jerry was 22 years old, he married Mayra Gale Brown, who was only 13 years old at the time. She was also his bassist's daughter, and also Jerry's cousin, his younger cousin. So that's just triple bad. It's extra spooky. Jerry Lee lied about his bride's age, saying that she was 15 years old, as if those 2 extra years make it any better. According to a Newsweek article, after facing backlash, his tour got canceled, his rock reputation suffered a permanent stain, but he still went on to have a healthy country career and win many awards and still be revered by his colleagues. The musician also hadn't officially split from his previous wife before even tying the knot to his new underage bride. Him and Brown did divorce about 13 years after, and she accused him of every type of physical and mental abuse imaginable. Lewis reported, admitting, "It was all my fault. She caught me cheating." He was actually married multiple times after that, I believe 7 times. Years after that, though, Brown said that their relationship was a successful divorce. Child brides can also fall victim to human trafficking. In some instances, marriage is used as a cover for the trafficking of young girls for sexual exploitation or even forced labor. The traffickers often exploit loopholes in marriage laws to avoid detection and prosecution. According to SavedInAmerica.org, there are more than 365,000 missing children in the U.S. every year, and around 30% of those are being trafficked. That's just over 100,000 children. Abuse and violence are very common in child marriages. Many child brides experience physical, emotional, or sexual abuse at the hands of their spouses. This abuse can have long-lasting consequences on their physical and mental health, including a higher risk of depression, PTSD, and other mental health issues. Escaping a child marriage can be incredibly challenging for survivors. Somewhere between 70 and 80% of child marriages in the U.S. end in divorce. You might be thinking, oh, well, that's good if they're able to get out. But if you think about it just a little bit deeper, these child brides are completely dependent on their spouse. And then when you divorce, you're usually left with nothing. Probably didn't finish school, and you're at a higher risk for poverty. It actually doubles the chances that you will end up in poverty. Girls who marry before 19 are twice as likely to drop out of high school and 4 times less likely to obtain a college degree. Child marriages also affect their health too. This includes higher rate of psychiatric disorders and exposure to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse, as we've said before. One story that comes to mind is a 58-year-old Florida woman and anti-child marriage advocate, Sherry Johnson. She was actually interviewed for The Guardian, and she shared her horrific story. She was actually featured on a docuseries as well, and I will have that in the show notes too. And maybe I can find a video of the interview as well. Sherry Johnson was 11 years old when her mother told her that she was going to get married. The bridegroom was 9 years older than her and a deacon in the strict church that her family attended. He was also the man who had raped her and gotten her pregnant at just 11 years old. They forced me to marry him to cover up the scandal, she said. Instead of putting the handcuffs on him and sending him to prison, they put the handcuffs on me and imprisoned me in a marriage. In 2013, Johnson was working at a barbecue stand in Tallahassee when she told her story to a senator who was one of her regular customers. She listened to me and decided to do something, Johnson recalled. She presented a bill to restrict child marriage in 2014, but it failed. That was because nobody understood the problem at the time, which is wild. How can you not understand that problem? People thought this can't be happening in Florida, much less in the US. The minimum marriage age is 18, so what's the problem? But they didn't understand all of the loopholes, she said. Between 2001 and 2015, 16,000 children were married in Florida alone. A 40-year-old man can legally marry a 5-year-old here, which is absolutely atrocious and disgusting and very concerning. Frady Reist, the director of campaigning organization Unchained at Last, which I've already mentioned previously, was born in an ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, which can be quite culty on its own. And she herself was coerced into marrying when she was just 19 years old. And she says that it's extremely ironic that laws make exceptions when parents consent to child marriage or when an underage girl is pregnant. In many, or rather most cases, the pregnancy is due to assault and or abuse, or as we should just call it, rape. And the solution, using air quotes here, the solution is to marry off the victim to the abuser in order to protect all parties from public disgrace. But that just traps the victim to their abuser and doesn't protect them at all. And then that way the abuser is allowed to legally continue to abuse the victim, which is absolutely awful and seems so backwards. So what can we do? Let's talk about laws and unfortunate loopholes surrounding child marriages in the United States. While some states have recently, which it sounds crazy that we have to even say recently on this topic, they've passed legislation to increase the minimum age for marriage. Many states still allow minors to marry under certain circumstances, such as parental consent or pregnancy, because that is such a great way to fix everything. If you get someone pregnant, why not just get married? No, do not do that. Pregnancy is not a reason to get married. Child marriage is legal in 44 states. There's only 50 states, and yet child marriage is legal in 44. In fact, it has only been in the last 3 years that New Jersey, Delaware, Minnesota, New York, and Pennsylvania have set the minimum age for marriage at 18 without any exceptions. Even more staggering is that in 20 states, there's no minimum age for marriage with a parental or judicial waiver, which is absolutely terrifying. And I do feel like those are the cases that are portrayed or situations that are portrayed on shows like Law & Order SVU, like the creepy pastor convinces parents to let him marry their 10-year-old daughter, something like that. Ugh, creeps out here. Now, these loopholes enable child marriages to continue, often with absolutely devastating consequences for the young brides that are involved. From 2000 to 2010, at least 3 states granted marriage licenses to 12-year-olds. That's right. I said 12-year-olds. Most little girls don't have their period by then, and then they're getting married. And at least 14 states granted marriage licenses to 13-year-olds. According to genderlawjustice.com, the UN and the U.S. State Department have deemed child marriage a human rights abuse. Yet the federal government has failed to act where child marriages implicate U.S. citizens. For example, Congress refused to ratify the Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC, which includes a provision denouncing child marriage. The U.S. is one of only 3 countries, along with Sudan and South Somalia, who have failed to ratify the CRC, which sounds absolutely wild. But it's true. And this is largely due to the fact that certain states wanted to preserve the right to execute minors. Congress has also failed to ratify the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, which likewise contains a provision against child marriage. The U.S. is the only industrialized democracy and is the only country in the Western Hemisphere that has not ratified CEDAW. In other countries, child marriage remains prevalent in the face of legal restrictions. However, in the U.S., the problem isn't ineffective enforcement of the laws, it's the lack of the laws themselves. Now, as we've learned today, child brides and underage marriages are a very complex and obviously concerning issue in the United States. By raising awareness and advocating for stronger policies and protective measures, we can work together to ensure that every child has the opportunity to grow up in a safe and nurturing environment, free from the risks and obvious harms associated with child marriage. I know it is asking a lot, but please do contact your elected officials, and please, let's try to work together to see what we can do about this. Because like we mentioned before, a lot of lawmakers don't see that it's an issue. I personally had no idea that child marriage was even an issue or even allowed in the United States, but it is. It is lurking in our own backyard. I do encourage you to learn more about this issue, support organizations working to end child marriage, and to advocate for stronger policies to protect children from underage marriages and being forced into this and having their childhood stripped away from them. Now that's going to be it for today's episode of the Down a Rabbit Hole podcast with your host, me, CCSUAREZ. Thank you so much for joining us today as we explored this absolutely difficult topic of child brides and underage marriages in the U.S. If you enjoyed this episode, this topic, please do consider subscribing on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Consider leaving a review, a 5-star one, or just don't leave one. For the love of God, please don't shatter my heart like that. Or even sharing with your family and friends or on social media. Tag us. I'd appreciate it. As always, if you would like these episodes 1 week early, you can do so by becoming a channel member over on the CCSUAREZ YouTube channel. And there are some other perks on there as well for channel members. Make sure that you follow us over on Instagram at Down a Rabbit Hole Podcast for trivia that we do in the Instagram stories. And then also I do pair a carousel post. That's a post that has multiple pictures in each one to go along with each episode for more info and visuals regarding each topic. And all sources will be linked in the description box on YouTube and the show notes as well under this episode, again, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, I would like to end this episode by doing something a little bit different. And I want to give a little bit of a shout out to a listener, and that is Nikki0510, who left a 5-star review for us over on Apple Podcasts. And it was so sweet. She said, "So excited. I love Chelsea on YouTube. Coming across that she has a podcast this AM made my whole day. I'm so here for this," with a cute little smiley face. Well, I appreciate you, Nikki. And thank you so much. I'm super happy to be back recording and posting the podcast. I'm not going to lie to y'all, keeping up with this, researching, scripting, recording, editing it all by myself, and then doing YouTube full-time, posting 3 videos a week. Yes, I have an editor for that, thank God, and a manager, but it can be tough, especially while pregnant. You are probably going to hear me be quite out of breath in some of these episodes going forward. I am sorry about it, but listen, my lungs are being compressed, and that's okay. We're trying our best, and that's really all we can do. But I love doing this and I love y'all, and I really do appreciate your support. I quite literally, as I say in my YouTube videos, I quite literally could not do this without you and without your support. So if you want a little shout out, be sure to leave a review. Who knows, you might just get featured at the end of the next episode. On that note though, I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.